The great architect Sinan, born in 1490 to 1588, makes him a contemporary of the Portuguese poet Camões, who we heard of earlier. He worked successively for 3 Ottoman sultans. His work as chief architect spanned 5 decades, contemporaneous with the height of Europe's Renaissance of the mid-16th century. I've selected one characteristic of Sinan's architectural production, which has received scant attention in the literature on Ottoman architecture, that I think will be of particular interest to this gathering and worthy of study. It comprises a series of low screening walls and windows of carved marble with pierced openwork or tracery to let in light and allow air circulation. Typically, these screens display polygonal networks, often with intersecting polygons. Here, a dual tessellation of hexagons and triangles. Before we look at these screens more closely, a bit of cultural context and visual culture. Sinan's greatest patron was Suleiman the Magnificent, who ruled for 46 years and died in 1566. Here, a portrait attributed to an Italian painter. When Suleiman died, he was immediately succeeded by Selim II, who died in 1574. The portraits of Selim, painted by painters at the Ottoman court, capture the passion for pattern in Ottoman art and interior design, in part what so later influenced European tastes and led to what we call today wallpaper patterns. Patterns in the plane. Selim was succeeded by Murat III, who ruled until he died in 1595, which was several years after the death of the architect Sinan in 1588. Sinan's work as chief architect included grand imperial commissions which transformed the landscape of Istanbul that had become the capital of the Ottoman Empire after its conquest from the Byzantines in 1453. Great building complexes, culées, such as the Imperial Süleymaniye Mosque complex shown here, and the Selimiye in Edirne, the earlier capital of the Ottoman Empire, but where Sinan built what he considered to be his greatest work, were conceived in their entirety and designed down to every last detail. More modest building complexes were built for viziers with details of not such a high consistency level in construction as his imperial commissions. Sinan is best known for his genius combining architecture and engineering, opening up interior space by creatively utilizing piers, columns, and arches to support a succession of domes and half-domes. As chief architect, he was responsible not only for design and oversight of construction throughout the Ottoman Empire, but also for the training of the corps of royal architects in what was called at the time the science of geometry. Sinan credits himself with the design of more than 400 monuments, most of which were built in the capital, Istanbul. He was born near Kayseri in central Anatolia, central Turkey, and he was the son of a stonemason. He was accepted into the Janissary Corps at a young age and began his training as an apprentice in carpentry. He progressed to engineering, accompanied the Sultan on numerous military campaigns, and was accepted into the Corps of Royal Architects, where he excelled in many endeavors. He well understood and expressed geometry in his three-dimensional compositions, contemporary, as I said, with the height of the European Renaissance. The seriousness of his scientific endeavors may be gleaned towards the end of his career from an imperial decree of 1578 that required the donation of his library on science and geometry to the pride of the astronomers Taqiyuddin, who had just established an astronomical observatory in Galata across the Golden Horn from the Ottoman imperial palace at Topkapi. Present as a feature in nearly all of Sinan's buildings, except his public works, that is, bridges and aqueducts, are a series of architectural panels with pierced openwork, designed to serve a variety of screening functions in different contexts: upper-level galleries and balconies, balconies of minarets from where the muezzin issued the call to prayer, windows on fountains seen here in the courtyard of Sokolu Mehmet Pasha Mosque, carved marble and forged iron, and here in the Süleymaniye Mosque courtyard fountain, as well as exterior windows here on Sinan's own tomb across from the Süleymaniye complex in Istanbul. As you can see, these architectural screens, whether of carved marble or forged iron, exhibit different configurations of intersecting polygons and polygonal networks. I think they may be considered as études for the study of plane geometry and would have been eminently suitable for the training of young architects. Of comparable, if not even greater, artistic significance are the screens of mosque furnishings that included, for example, elaborately carved stone minbars, or pulpits, framing upper parts of stone and wood structures, such as loggias for the royalty and religious leaders in mosques, maksura and the muezzin's mahfil, as we see here, and chests and stands for housing Quran, kursi. We know from biographical sources that other precious containers, some made with inlaid mother of pearl, tortoise shell, and rare woods, exquisite in every detail, were used for the training of architects on the grounds of the gardens at Topkapi Palace. Relatively speaking, in comparison to the mother of pearl work, the architectural screens are modest, but they are exceptional in the simple formal elegance that so adroitly matches form to function. They are, for the most part, flat panels, usually rectangular, made of carved and pierced marble or forged of iron. Aesthetically, these panels play with light and dark, solid and void. The effects of sunlight, constantly changing throughout the day and in different seasons, create projections of shadows that contribute visual interest to the articulated ambiguities of interior and exterior space that is mediated by this openwork. These screens explicitly convey the essence of geometry through points, angles, planes, with specific references to vertices, edges, and faces, articulating relationships among intersecting polygons, star polygons, polygon networks. The Ottoman Turkish word for these works is ahcar-i mushebbeke, which translates literally to stone networks or reticulated stones. Sinan himself was credited with having constructed a primary school having a walled enclosure surrounded by a most beautifully constructed ahcar-i mushebbeke, the form of stone screen that he selected for his own tomb enclosure. My own walks through Istanbul and Edirne and a culling of published images in the literature on Ottoman history have located well over 100 examples of such screens in mosques and tomb structures, of monuments and design and construction for which Sinan had oversight. I'm sure that many more examples can be located throughout former lands of the Ottoman Empire. In the screens that I have examined, all of the tessellations of regular polygons, triangles, squares, hexagons, have been identified. Such grids are often, but not always, articulated in the marble. By examining the vertices, edges, and faces, the screens may be classified according to their composition in relation to these underlying grids, whether or not they are articulated in stone. I can suggest the following distinct categories of intersecting polygons and polygon networks. First, intersecting dodecagons without any articulated grid, by now familiar to you from my title slide, but also in forged iron. Second, dual tessellations of hexagons and regular hexagons and equilateral triangles, yielding a tessellation of kites, also noted on wooden doors. Intersecting dodecagons. Here the orientation of the dodecagons is off. They should be on point. With a dual tessellation of hexagons and equilateral triangles, or combined with a hexagonal grid and a variant. A network, wait, let me go through this. There you see the intersecting dodecagons with the hexagonal grid and the equilateral triangle grid, and a variant. Network of dodecagons in a square grid, and finally intersecting nonagons with a hexagonal grid, and two more examples. Let me go through this again, the hexagons and the interlacing or interlocking nonagons. While dodecagons occur, and the two additional examples, that earlier mosque complex of the vizier and one of the screens on a balcony. While dodecagons occur in a variety of configurations intersecting one another or within a triangular or hexagonal grid, or forming a network within a square grid, the nonagons, as you see here, only occur as intersecting polygons with a hexagonal grid, and the points are cut off top and bottom. Interestingly, although the nonagon is considered to be not constructible using a compass and straight edge for this period, certainly, intersecting nonagons have a historical precedent in the 12th century Gumbadi Surk in Iran, the subject of an article I published several years ago in Nexus Network Journal. Of a very different species than the above categorization of periodic patterns in the plane, glimpsed in at least one slide, are the exceptional circular compositions with radial symmetry of pentagons and decagons, which occur in several, if not all, of Sinan's major mosques. But this kind of radial pattern is restricted to the circle that resides in the right triangle of the screening walls framing the mimbar, pulpit, in a mosque, the subject of another lecture. While this classification is by no means complete, several observations are relevant at this early stage of investigation. Geometry of all the vertices is very specific and reflects thorough understanding of the underlying constructions. At each vertex, the sum of the angles must equal 360 degrees, and this seems often to be accomplished with perpendicular lines and right angles, using one-point matching rules for tiling achieved by means of bisection at midpoints of edges. Dual tessellations also show right angle intersections and bisections at midpoints. Nonagons intersect hexagons at right angles. Each nonagon intersects three other nonagons, and each hexagon is surrounded by 6 nonagons, revealing a 6-pointed star in negative space. Likewise, sets of 6 dodecagons reveal a 6-pointed star in negative space. Mimbar screens, however, reach the epitome of virtuosity, often combining several patterns in different sections, including skillful construction of circular compositions with 5-fold and 10-fold radial symmetry. All of these patterns have historical antecedents within Islamic architecture of Iran, Uzbekistan, Syria, Egypt, and pre-Ottoman Turkey in works created often with royal patronage in a variety of media. Sinan's genius isolated these forms, reduced their complexity to its geometric essence, establishing an elegant minimalism in white marble that emphasizes dark and light in the articulation of form. As far as I know to date, Sinan screens have attracted little scholarly attention, but their potential importance as etude or studies in stone may be quite significant, indicative of a sustained interest and applied methodology in exploring the geometry of polygonal networks many decades before publication of Kepler's theoretical study of polygons in Harmonica Mundi in 1619. Thank you.